Mr. AJ Gupta, good to have you in here.
Thanks, Craig.
So let's talk about the uglier side of the real estate environment, right? So sometimes if you own a home, I own several pieces of real estate, investment properties, and I've had to evict someone before. It's not a fun process, and my understanding, at least the experiences I've had, the law tends to be on the side of the tenant. What do we need to know?
Well, I don't necessarily know if the law is on the side of the tenant altogether. I mean, there's different kinds of defaults. A monetary default in California happens quite quickly. Don't pay rent, 3-day notice, eviction can probably have them out in 30, 35 days.
Okay.
If it goes smoothly, and you can even get your judgment in that in shortly thereafter. So I don't view California as being necessarily the most tenant-friendly state. I do
really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they happen
The real
fast.
estate I own is investment properties, most of them are in Missouri.
Okay.
So different experiences there. Now this is like 10 years ago before I learned a little thing or two. And I had a property manager in Missouri, and they said that my tenant wasn't paying. It's funny, the tenant doesn't remember that you have a mortgage payment that they're screwing you over on.
Right.
So my thought was, I didn't have AJ Gupta in my life at the time. I said, why don't we just take his front door off? It's middle of winter.
Whoops.
Is that a good idea? Can you do that, AJ?
Yeah, probably don't want to do that.
Probably not.
No, I mean,
it didn't work out well.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it wouldn't, especially if the police were involved and all of that stuff. Yeah,
we didn't actually do it.
Don't take the door off. So just so we're clear,
got it.
Don't do that.
Got it.
So
so what is the role of property managers in a situation like this, though?
So property managers are great. One, they're a buffer, right? You don't want to have a mad tenant knocking on your door where he's sending rent to ask for an extra 30 days or whatever it is. You don't want to have that direct contact with them. And where you don't have that direct contact, you still need to provide an address in the lease where someone can be served on your behalf. It creates all sorts of problems otherwise. So a property manager acts primarily as a buffer between you and that tenant. Secondarily, and you mentioned managing properties in Missouri.
Yep.
We see the opposite, obviously being California attorneys, where people have properties in California, buy a property, move to Missouri, they rent out the home here.
Right.
Then the eviction comes up, and they have got to evict a tenant, and they're the landlord on the lease.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if you have an unlawful detainer, which is an eviction proceeding that goes to trial, you got to fly in from Missouri to be there, eve of trial bankruptcy, doesn't show up, all sorts of things happen. You got to fly back to Missouri. They set another trial. So if you're an out of state owner of California property, you almost have to have a property manager.
What about commercial? So you work a lot of big cases here. You're very well known in San Diego as the go-to guy for stuff like this. What are some of the things we need to know on that front? You own some commercial property, you're leasing it out.
Well, I think if you're leasing out commercial property, you probably have attorneys that are advising you. But where we see it, other than our landlord clients, is where the most mistakes are made is where you have a tenant that goes into a commercial property. And, I don't know exactly what the statistics are, but 90% of businesses fail. You've got an investment that you think about that you're putting in. Well, me and my partners put in $100,000, but what you're not thinking about is a personal guarantee on the lease.
Right.
And so there's two aspects where you got to think about when you're getting into that lease. One is capping the liability around the personal guarantee. Landlords, for a new business in particular, should get a personal guarantee. They should be entitled to one. Because if it's a new business, there's no past performance, no financials. So they're going to demand a personal guarantee, and you're going to give it to them if you want to execute on the business. But you should think about trying to cap that personal guarantee. Maybe the first 3 years.
That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe the first 5 years. And the second thing that people make, probably the biggest mistake, is in the partnership agreement amongst the partners. Usually what we see a lot of is one partner guarantees the lease, the other partner doesn't. Business falls apart. The partner that guarantees the lease is on the hook. The agreements between the partners on the guarantees are so important because, and you should get an attorney because it's an exceptional liability.
Well, today we've talked about commercial, right? We talked about residential. The last time we had AJ on the show, we actually discussed if you're buying a home. Look, realtors at times can have commission on their minds, right? We just talked about that there's 20,000 of them. So if you're going to rent anything, or you're going to lease it out to somebody else, or you're going to buy anything in real estate, residential or commercial, it makes sense to have it reviewed by a real estate attorney. Yes, you might have a great advisor in real estate, and yes, they might be a good friend of yours for many years, but they are not attorneys, and you're handing over a lot of money, an earnest deposit, in a contract that doesn't just last for that one transaction. This can bind you for many, many years. High recommendation here. Reach out to AJ Gupta. He's a great friend of mine. He's a great friend of the show. Always great to have him in here. Thank you, AJ, for coming in. Help us understand what we do in a situation like this. Can be tough, but that's why we got guys like you.
Well,
and don't take the front door off.
don't take the front door.
We learned something today.
Call us before you do that.
Got it.